It was 1963, 1964. The civil rights movement had been underway for over 10 years. St. Augustine was, at that time, almost certainly the last city to be thrust into the civil rights movement. The people who protested there followed Martin Luther King's model of nonviolent civil disobedience. Nowadays, they're credited by historians as having helped sustain the pressure needed to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and they paid dearly for it. The level of violence was extraordinary. But they were never formally recognized for what they did and how they suffered until now. This video is just a primer on the subject of how a monument is physically made. Where to begin? A thought becomes a sketch. The sketch becomes an illustration. The illustration may become a maquette or a model of some kind. Actually, you begin sculpting when you first start thinking seriously about it. For me, it starts at the coffee house near my studio. You have your latte, your table covered with notebooks and a drawing pad. You haven't been awake for very long. You haven't even begun to do anything that even remotely resembles physical labor. And yet, the sculpture is already underway in your imagination. You know how much it will cost, how much it will weigh, how to transport it, how to install it. Now the honeymoon is over, and you have to get on with it. The client having approved your designs, and the bank having honored the client's down payment. Thus there is a change in scenery, from the coffee house to the relative isolation of the studio, where the entire surface is modeled in clay. But clay, being heavy and not always able to support its own weight, is applied to an armature that is fully adjustable. This allows me to make sweeping changes to the overall composition with ease, right up until the time I call it done. But this is not a math problem. In the end, it's not about the measurements. As an artist, you have to make sure that you maintain an unobstructed view of the goals you started off with, so that the sculpture retains its power. The creative effort is mostly over when the clay is done. Then, you will use the lost wax method of bronze casting. This involves recreating the entire sculpture all over again twice as a separate project. The clay, which is still intact, is set aside. First, the sculpture is recreated in wax. Then, the wax will be destroyed, and every detail that you see in the wax will be replaced with bronze. But where is the bronze, you ask? All of this effort and no bronze in sight. Well, a ceramic material is built up around the wax patterns. Then the wax is removed, leaving a negative space that will be filled with molten bronze. Hence the phrase, cast bronze. The ceramic mold is able to withstand the mechanical and thermal shock of molten metal rushing into it. It, too, is destroyed in the process of divesting the bronze after it cools down. The word cast, incidentally, is derived from a Latin word which means to hurl or to throw, which is precisely what will happen if you were to screw up that ceramic mold. You could end up wearing that molten metal as a toupee, were it not for the fact that the human race has been casting bronze for 3,000 or 4,000 years. We've gotten pretty good at it. These foundry men are part artist, part craftsman, part fabricator, industrial poets, if you will, and on their best days, they're as fluent with their hands as a surgeon. What about the base? Well, a thought becomes a sketch becomes a drawing becomes a maquette. The maquette becomes a life-size model, this time a life-size model made of foam. And this gives rise to a mold, designed to receive, in this case, cast stone. Monument making is a mosaic art form, consisting of many other types of art. The artist may be the most visible player, but in the end it's usually a team effort, involving people who, for their own purposes, try to exceed their own expectations of themselves, and, perhaps, desire to add to the world's objects and ideas those things that will outlast themselves, whose purpose is contemplation and appreciation.